Sup, guys? 2-0 yesterday. A fine day, if I must say so. There's a lot of work to do to get back. Today, I'm not going to have any official plays. We have a small baseball card today with, I don't know, 8 games or so. And I almost wanted to play a couple, which is why I'm doing this video, because I'll just break a couple of them down, talk about what I think the stronger leans are, but not actually plays that I'm going to be making. But yesterday, I mean, it's unfortunate the way it had to happen with my Red Sox getting absolutely annihilated in historic fashion against the Colorado Rockies. I mean, I liked the play on the Rockies, but I did not expect the Red Sox to lose 20-7. And even that was a generous looking final, given how bad the game was. It was 20-3, I think, in the 8th inning. And Colorado obviously just kind of put in whoever, I think. And the Red Sox got some like mercy runs basically at the end. The Toronto Blue Jays was close, but they did outplay Tampa in that game. Toronto had the lead early, surrendered it, and then put up a 4 spot and then did not look back after that. So that went well. Looking at today's slate here, I mean, I think that there are a couple of games where there are pitching mismatches, I would say. Well, mostly this game between San Diego and Washington. But do I really want to play on San Diego when Washington is maybe going to play a little bit harder to avoid the sweep? Maybe, because I think the fact that this is Dylan Cease against Patrick Corbin, I mean, that is a huge pitching mismatch. Cease, I've talked about both of them on the show extensively. Cease has really good numbers this year. And I don't know why some of the professionals were continuing to say, like up until pretty recently, I think maybe they've changed their tune. They were talking about how Cease is going to regress and all this stuff, and he's not that good. And I'm like, I don't know, man. You look at the stats that he's putting up, his strikeout rate is just absolutely insane. Like one of the highest in baseball with 159 strikeouts and 122 innings, only 89 hits allowed, 37 walks. I mean, you could knock him a little bit, I guess, for being slightly wild, but he is just dominating. He's coming off multiple dominating performances in a row over Atlanta and Cleveland, allowing 1 hit in each of those and striking out a combined 21 across those two. So I would not want to go against this guy right now, to be honest. But I think the reason why I'm being kept off of it, though, is that, I mean, San Diego is a public road favorite, even though it looks like the cash is actually coming in on San Diego, too, and moving them up from -165 to -178. So I think they are public, but it looks like there is legit money coming in on their side as well. But I just don't want to lay a price like that on the road, to be honest, against a team that probably is going to be at least pretty motivated to try to avoid the sweep here in San Diego. I don't know who they have up next. If they have like a big, oh no, they play Baltimore next, I think, right? Yeah, because they're on this East Coast trip right now where they're playing Washington and then Baltimore back to back. So I mean, Baltimore's arguably a pretty big series upcoming for them too. So those things keep me off of it a little bit. And then Cease, he does have pretty dominant numbers against Washington, so that's good. They're only 4 for 23 off him, with a 12-4 strikeout walk ratio, 174 batting average, 557 OPS with no home runs mixed in there. Only extra base hit, a triple from Harold Ramirez, who is the only player on Washington who even has a hit off of Cease, although a few of them have walked, but that's just kind of crazy too. It's up against Patrick Corbin, and I've mentioned him on the show too. He's just not good. I mean, he's been struggling mightily, but his recent starts haven't been that bad. He's been pitching decently in July with a 14-3 strikeout walk ratio, 17 hits allowed and 16 innings pitched. 8 earned runs, not that great, but not as bad as what he had been doing. He's coming off a pretty good start against Cincinnati. He is still not good, though. I mean, 5.35 ERA, 1.49 whippers. Cease, 3.76 ERA, 1.03 whip. Corbin against the Padres, his stats are actually awful as well. They're 28 for 93 off him lifetime. 3 home runs, 20 RBIs, 6 doubles, 11-3 strikeout walk ratio, but a 301 batting average and 785 OPS. So I think everything about that does look like a mismatch to me, and I think that is why the cash is coming in. So San Diego, somewhat of a strong lean, I would say, given all that. So I do kind of lean that way. The market does seem to be in agreement on that one. San Francisco and Dodgers is kind of interesting just because Clayton Kershaw is coming off the DL, and this is going to be his first start of the season. When you have veteran pitchers coming off the DL like that, I think they tend to get docked a little bit in the market, so you tend to be able to find some value. but maybe not when it's Kershaw because his name is so big. This line has actually dropped from the Dodgers minus 140 to minus 135. They have 66% of the tickets, so they are still public, but 84% of the cash. He's up against Logan Webb. Webb actually has decent stats career-wise against the Dodgers. He's not a horrible pitcher, and he is pretty, I mean, I don't know what else I was going to say. Well, he goes like pretty deep into games. He's kind of a workhorse type of pitcher. So I actually do kind of like Webb. Webb's got a 3.59 ERA, 1.27 whip is a little bit high for my liking, but 111 strikeouts to 32 walks is a pretty good ratio. 130 in a third innings pitched. So he's not a huge strikeout guy. 134 hits allowed is a little bit high as well, but his stats against the Dodgers are pretty good lifetime, and Kershaw's stats, I think, against San Francisco are also pretty good. Webb has held the Dodgers to 39 for 160, so a lot of familiarity there, but 11 doubles, 2 home runs, 17 RBIs, 41 to 12 strikeout walk ratio, 244 batting average, and 647 OPS. So Webb has done well against the Dodgers, and Kershaw in his career has done pretty well against the Giants as well. Kershaw last year, I mean, he's getting up there in age. He's 36, but he still had an ace-like season last year with a 2.46 ERA, 1.06 whip. As I said, he's not played this year yet, but his strikeout rate was still over 9 per 9 innings last year. Wasn't walking a ton of guys, really kept the amount of hits allowed down. So he's been still very difficult to hit even in his older age. He's one of the best pitchers in baseball as far as like looking at what their career track record is. He's one of the best, and he's still kind of got it. The Giants are 25 for 125 off in lifetime with 6 doubles, a triple, 4 home runs, 12 RBIs, 33 to 9 strikeout walk ratio, 200 batting average, and 614 OPS. So he's done well against them. So the way I would look at this game would actually be to lean to the under. It's gone down a little bit from 8.5 to 8.5 juice to the under. 59% of the tickets are on the over. Public likes to come in on these overs, man, when they see the Dodgers, who have a really good lineup. Yesterday's game went over with an 8-3 final, though the other 2 games in this series were less high scoring than that. The Dodgers finally lost their win streak yesterday to the Giants. So you could see that going either way, kind of. Like, is that going to kind of hang them over into this game for the Dodgers, or does that mean that the Dodgers will be in a bounce back spot here? Again, I don't know. The side I think is tougher, so I like the total better. Like I said, 59% of the tickets on the over, but 71% of the cash coming in on the under. So I do like the under in that one. Consider that, and I considered the Atlanta Braves. They're sitting at minus 120 as a road favorite, so you do have to lay a price there. 69% of the tickets, so they're a public road favorite, but kind of like with San Diego, they have more of the cash as well, 89% of the cash. And I do think that Atlanta has the better starting pitcher in that one, but there are some reasons why I kind of don't like it as much. The situation I do think is strong. I almost played this game until I looked at the starting pitchers, particularly Sale. His track record against the Mets isn't good, and that's what's keeping me off of this game as a play. But the Mets, they're in a bad spot, to be honest, man. They have not played a home game since coming out of the All-Star break. They were down in Miami, and then they did come home to New York, but they played at Yankee Stadium. So you might say, well, that's kind of like them returning home, right, from a short road trip, kind of, but that's a big series, man. The Subway Series against the Yankees, and the Mets swept them in 2 games and beat them both times, including just clobbering them 12-3 yesterday. Garrett Cole not pitching well, really, since he's come back, doesn't have it together. That's a huge win, so that could put the Mets in a letdown spot, man, and they're technically still returning home, even though they are staying in the city of New York. But I think that makes it a bad spot, a letdown spot, whereas Atlanta has only won 1 game coming out of the All-Star break. The first game, they've had a lot of rain postponements, but then they wound up losing the next 2 to the Cardinals, which I think one of those was a doubleheader, I think, because the first game was postponed. Then they had a postponement against the Reds. Tried to play a doubleheader yesterday and had one of those games postponed. So Atlanta has only played 2 games in the previous 3 days. So the Mets have played 1 more game than Atlanta has, although Atlanta's schedule is kind of all shaky because of all of that. But Atlanta played yesterday afternoon, whereas the Mets played last night in that was the big ESPN game, Mets-Yankees last night. So that's another strike against the Mets, really, because the Mets could be in an exacerbated letdown spot because they're coming off that big television game at night. Not only was it a win over the Yankees, but a primetime ESPN game. Kind of like what you look at when you have like teams coming off the Sunday night game. Everybody kind of knows in handicapping that you tend to look to go against those teams, especially if they get a big win against a rival on Sunday night. You want to look to go against them. Same thing goes here, I think, for the Mets. I think it is a bad spot for the Mets for that reason. Atlanta has more rest, and Atlanta has been losing. They got swept in that series by the Reds, although they're going to have to play a makeup game later this year to actually technically finish that series. But Atlanta needs to bounce back, man, and do something. Of course, you say what better than with Chris Sale on the mound? Yeah, I mean, he's been excellent this year. Even though he's 35 years old, he's having a resurgence big time this year with a 2.7 ERA, 0.95 whip, 140 strikeouts and only 24 walks and 81 hits allowed and 110 innings pitched. So not a lot of walks, a ton of strikeouts, not a lot of hits allowed at all. He's been totally dominating. But even though I think he has not faced the Mets this year, the thing that is giving me pause on this one is that the Mets actually hit him well and in a lot of at-bats, but it's mostly Iglesias and Lindor. Everybody else on the team doesn't really have like extensive numbers against him or don't particularly do well against him, but those two guys have really beat him up. But that does amount for, if you include everybody else, it does amount to Sale getting hit by the Mets to the tune of 37 for 115, 7 doubles, 5 home runs, 15 RBIs. He does have a 28-5 strikeout walk ratio against him, but it is a 322 average and 863 OPS. So Sale's stats against the Mets aren't good, but again, like I said, most of it is against Iglesias and Lindor, and it's like, well, you're only going to see them so many times in one game. But still, it's enough that it gives me a little bit of hesitation that maybe the Mets could do some damage there, but Sale is the better pitcher over Severino, even though Severino has good numbers this year, 3.58 ERA, 1.18 whip, but his strikeout rate is very low. Like, he's been a decent strikeout pitcher in the past, but this year that has not been the case. We've actually seen a significant drop-off in his strikeout numbers, which is odd to see, and his walk numbers kind of remain the same, so his walk number is still a little bit high. But with that strikeout drop, I don't know if that means a drop in velocity or what's going on there. Even though he has still seen success this year, that gives me a little bit of pause with Severino. 88-40 strikeout walk ratio, and 96 hits allowed is good in 115 and 2/3 innings pitched. So he's still been difficult to hit, but that strikeout drop off is a little bit weird to me, and we may see his numbers start to regress a little bit. And against Atlanta, he's actually done okay against Atlanta batting average wise, but the OPS is a bit high. So they're 14 for 54 off him with 4 doubles, 3 home runs, 7 RBIs, 16-9 strikeout walk ratio. So he has walked a lot of guys against him. So that's typical of him, though. Wildness. Atlanta's hit him to the tune of a 259 batting average, but an 865 OPS because of all those extra base hits and walks mixed in there. So Severino's numbers kind of on the mediocre side, I would say, against Atlanta. So it still amounts to me leaning pretty strongly to the Atlanta side in that one. I do like that one a little bit. And then I'll close it out talking about Oakland and Anaheim, because I do think Anaheim is in a bad spot, but the market looks to be on the Anaheim side, which kind of baffles me. They're sitting at a minus 105 favorites. The odds makers are telling you that Oakland, in either this pitching matchup or just overall, that Oakland is actually the slightly better team. I think maybe some of it has to do with the pitching matchup. Maybe it has to do with Oakland's recent better offense. I don't know, but Oakland has 54% of the tickets on them. So the recreational bettors are actually coming in slightly on the Oakland side, but 65% of the cash on the other side on Anaheim. But I actually don't agree with that market read in this one. I actually lean to the Oakland side slightly because LA is returning home from a road, or not LA, LAA. I always call them LA, but Anaheim, LA of Anaheim. They're returning home from a road trip. They were in Oakland. They just faced Oakland. So that's one part of what I'm looking at in this pitching matchup here. Anaheim did lose 2 out of 3 to Oakland, but they won the last game against Oakland. So I don't think there's any real revenge motive here because of that. I mean, these teams are in the same division. They play each other a lot. That was basically a split series, like whatever. And then Anaheim went up to Seattle and swept Seattle and held them to 3 runs in the entire series, but Anaheim themselves only scored 10 in the entire series, so very low-scoring games in that series. Not a lot of offense. It is a pitching park for sure, and the Mariners have really good starting pitching. Mariners don't hit very well, and neither does Anaheim, so that's not totally shocking, but still very low-scoring games there. Now Anaheim's returning home from a road trip off of a sweep of the team that was like the front runner in the division for a bit, but now I think Houston probably is. After Houston, I think, beat Seattle, and then Houston won last night, I think, finally against Oakland, but I think they were on the verge of getting swept. But still, that's a big series for Anaheim. You sweep Seattle on the road, who's one of the best teams in your division. That's a big sweep, and now they're returning home, facing another division opponent, but it is still Oakland, and Anaheim did still beat them the last time they played them. Looking at the starting pitching matchup, Ross Stripling is pitching for Oakland. He's coming off the DL. So again, just like with Kershaw, I think when you get a veteran coming off the DL, I think they tend to get a little bit pumped up for that game. And they tend to pitch a little bit better in that game, returning from the DL. But it is Ross Stripling still. So you got to keep your expectations in check there a little bit, because he's got a 5.82 ERA this season when he was pitching up until late May. Bad ERA, 5.82, 1.6 whip. He's not a good pitcher. His stats are bad. 35 to 12 strikeout walk ratio. He's not a big strikeout guy. The amount of walks isn't very high, but 77 hits allowed in 55 and 2/3 innings pitched. He's been way too hittable. Doesn't strike a lot of guys out, so that doesn't really bode necessarily that well for Stripling, but I still think he is actually the better of these two starting pitchers, which is crazy to think about in this one. Against Anaheim, Stripling has actually done pretty well. They're 9 for 41 off him lifetime with 3 doubles, a home run, 6 RBIs, 9-2 strikeout walk ratio, 220 batting average, and 622 OPS. So Stripling has actually done pretty well against Anaheim, and Anaheim hasn't seen him yet this year, I don't believe. So that at least bodes somewhat well for Stripling. Maybe not great just because he's not that great a pitcher. But on the other side, Kenny Rosenberg is pitching for Anaheim. And I think he's 29 years old, and he doesn't have many statistics in the majors at all. He's been in the majors since 2022, and there's not much to like. He's got a 4.36 career ERA, 1.49 career whip. Just not a lot going on there with 24 walks and 44 strikeouts and 53 and 2/3 innings pitched over his career. Not a high strikeout rate and a very high walk rate. 56 hits allowed too, so more than 1 hit per inning. So he's just been pretty bad on his career. And this season, in 2 appearances, both out of the bullpen, those haven't been good either. 6.3 ERA, 1.6 whip. He's come in like long relief roles, I think. So he's kind of at a starter's workload for most. He's basically had a starter's workload as far as how many innings he's pitched in those 2 games. 10 innings pitched across the 2 not 2 starts, 2 appearances, and has a 6.3 ERA, 1.6 whip across those. So that's not good either. And a 7-4 strikeout walk ratio and 12 hits allowed in those 10 innings. Also not good. Rosenberg, he's a guy who I think they've just had to bring in to kind of fill a spot here, because Anaheim just doesn't really have a pitcher right now. So in comes Rosenberg, who's been in the bullpen, but even coming out of the bullpen, he's only made 2 appearances. He's only made 12 appearances in his entire career since 2022, and 3 starts, which were all last year. And those starts didn't go that well either, I don't think, based on all of his stats that I see. Oakland has seen him before, I think, as well. They're 6 for 30 off him lifetime with 1 double, no other extra base hits though, 1 RBI. He's got a 7-1 strikeout walk ratio against him, and so it's a 200 batting average and 459 OPS. So Oakland's hitters actually haven't done that well against him, and Anaheim's hitters haven't done that well against Stripling either. So that's an interesting situation where you're like, well, both of these starting pitchers are actually pretty awful. So you tend to want to look towards maybe an over there, but then you see that both of these starters have actually pretty good numbers against the opposing hitters, and that kind of gives you a little bit of pause, and it's like, well, now I don't actually know which way I would go as far as the total is concerned. And the total here, it's gone up a little bit from 9 to 9, juice to the over, with 86% of the tickets on the over, but 99% of the cash on the over. It's weird to see the public coming in on an over in an Oakland-Anaheim game, or Anaheim just hasn't been scoring at all. Maybe they see that Oakland has scored some recently. I don't know what the case is there, but it does look like more of the money is also coming in on the over. So I guess that's the way I would lean, just because I think these pitchers are both awful. And because of Anaheim's low-scoring games recently, I think that we could expect some move back towards the mean in that department. But both these pitchers, like I said, do have decent history against these opposing hitters. But I think I would still kind of lean to the Oakland side more than the total here, even though the market looks completely against it. So I'm not going to play it. But the other thing that Oakland has going for them is the familiarity aspect of this, where Stripling coming off the DL, and I think Anaheim hasn't faced him this year, whereas Rosenberg, even though he's only made 2 starts, both out of the bullpen, or not 2 starts, I keep saying starts, 2 appearances, both out of the bullpen. His most recent appearance was 5 days ago, and it was against these Oakland A's in that previous series. He went 4 innings, gave up 1 earned run, which is fine. It's a fine performance, a 3-1 strikeout walk ratio, 4 hits allowed. So a lot of that is factoring into those stats I just read off with Rosenberg against Oakland. So a lot of it was that appearance. And now Oakland just faced him. So they're facing him again in his next appearance. So that means Oakland is used to him because they just saw him for 4 innings. So I think that is also a little bit of an advantage to Oakland's hitters there. So that's the breakdown. Break down like half of the games. Give you 20 minutes with no official plays here today. But those are some leans, some information. Have a good day, man. Peace out.